Session 12 of the Law of One. In this session, they speak about the Orion Crusaders, as well as the Confederation and the Wanderers. So the first question, can you describe the chariots the Orion Crusaders came to Earth in? And Ra says that the term chariots is basically a word that we use in warfare among our people. And that is the only significance of it. That the real shape of it is a craft that is elongated or ovoid in shape and is darker than silver, metallic in the light, but without the light appears red or fiery. Other craft that they've used are disc-shaped, about 3.6 meters or 12 feet in diameter, and a box-like shape as well, which is 40 feet or 12 meters side to side, and other craft that can basically be made into any shape using thought. That those who know how to work with intelligent infinity are obviously more able or easily able to manipulate those shapes. And then the questioner asks, has the Confederation made any effort to stop the Orion chariots from coming here? Ra says that every effort is made to quarantine Earth. However, the network of guardians, similar to any patrol team, can't stop everyone from coming through. If a request is made to enter with love and light, then they will be allowed because they align with the law of one. This I don't get. Simply because the law of one encompasses both polarities. So I'm not sure if he made an error there. Anyway, I will continue. So he says that sometimes entities get through without making a request. The questioner asks, how does the Confederation stop the Orion chariots from entering? And Ra says that there is contact at the level of the light body being, depending on the vibration level of the guardian. And that these guardians sweep areas of your Earth's energy fields, attempting to be aware of any entities approaching. That the entity is then hailed in the name of the one creator, and they are bathed in love light, and will of free will obey quarantine due to the power of the law of one. I will continue. Not so sure how much free will is applied here. The question asks, what happens if the entity doesn't obey? And Ra says to not obey quarantine after being hailed on the level of which they speak would be equivalent to your not stopping upon walking into a solid brick wall. So basically their free will is to not walk into the wall and to turn around and go somewhere else because they actually cannot access Earth. The questioner asks, if he did this, what would happen to his chariot? Ra says that the creator is one being. The vibratory level of those able to reach the quarantine boundaries is such that upon seeing the love light net, it is impossible to break this law. Therefore, nothing happens, no attempt is made, and there's no confrontation. I actually remember this so clearly, hearing this point, the last time I listened to this book, which was, a while back. And because of how difficult this language is, there were so many moments where I would have to rewind and listen again, and go back and listen again, multiple times to get what he was actually saying. But this, I remember, this really stuck with me. And it actually, makes me think of how powerless negative entities are when I kind of boom love at them. They don't fight back. They don't try. It's like the one kryptonite, the one thing that they have absolutely no power against is love. So still I am an advocate. Your weapon of choice should always be love. He goes on to say that the only ones able to penetrate the quarantine are those who discover windows or distortions in the time-space continuum surrounding your planet's energy fields, and that these windows are rare and unpredictable. The questioner asks, does this account for the UFO flaps where a large number of UFOs showed up in 1973? And Ra says correct. I did Google it and I saw a couple of pictures, but it wasn't significant enough for me to kind of add to this video. But if you are keen, you're welcome to give it a Google and see what comes up, because it's a bunch of separate images. Moving on. The questioner asks, are most of the UFOs we see in our skies from the Orion group? And Ra says that many are, and that they send out messages, and that some of these messages are received by those who are in service to others. So they're not all going straight to those who are service to self. Even those who are service to others receive these messages occasionally. And then I struggled a bit to understand this. There are 2 points in this session that, even with the use of ChatGPT, were a little bit difficult to understand, but maybe it will become clearer in later sessions. Nonetheless, I'll share anyway. He says that the messages are then changed to be acceptable to these entities while warning of difficulties ahead. Later in this session, he talks about how when people channel, they can sometimes bring in messages of doom and gloom, even if they are intending to be of service to others. Sometimes the channel is not clear enough. I wonder if this is not what he means, is that they will, bring these messages of difficulty ahead to those who are in service to others. So this is the most self-serving entities can do, or these entities can do when dealing with those who serve others. It makes sense, I guess. Maybe it's like a scare tactic. Difficulties ahead. Bebop, bebop, the world's about to end. Which ultimately drops them into more fear. My co-worker, as I mentioned before in a previous, in fact, I can't remember if I've mentioned it in this series, but my co-worker a couple of years ago was such an excellent channel, but she started to kind of, be approached by negative entities and struggled to kind of shake that fear that was being created. And one of the things that came up from these moments of channeling, I still don't know if this was accurate information or if this was now what Ra's describing as stuff that comes from the Orion group. She was shown how the world is going to end in 10 years. This was about 3 years ago. And this is not something that she's explored anywhere else. So it was, really coming directly to her through a channeled source and not through any materials that she was listening to. I certainly had not talked about anything like that with her. But it showed her how the world was going to end in 10 years. This was the timeline. But when you listen to other channels and, you listen to New Earth stuff and the Bible, Revelations, there's so much information that indicates, not the Bible, but other places that indicate that 10-year period at that time. There was other stuff I was listening to as well that also indicated around a 10-year period. Now, the world ending, of course, is up for interpretation. What does that mean? Maybe one version dying and a new version being birthed. So I don't know if she was kind of tapping into some kind of truth that was actually unfolding at this time, or some timeline that we're on, or if she was being fed scary information. But anyway, it was fascinating at the time because I knew that she didn't have access to any of that information, but she was channeling it from wherever she was channeling it from, and it scared the crap out of her. And yeah, basically, she's not channeling anymore. Anyway, Ra goes on to say that there are also many positive UFOs created through thought form by the Confederation, and other sightings are because people accidentally see government secret weapons, basically the ones that were spoken about in previous sessions. The questioner asks, who contacted Henry, and I really don't know how to pronounce his last name, but I will try, Puharich, in Israel in 1972. Ra says, we can't answer because Henry might read this at a later stage, which will cause distortions in his future. Then the questioner asks, who was contacting the group that the questioner was originally in 1962? And Ra says that they were contacted by the Confederation. The questioner asks, did the Confederation have any crafts in their area at the time? Ra says no, but there were thought forms. The questioner, you mentioned the Orion Crusaders. When they do get through the net, that they give both technical and non-technical information. We understand the technical information, but what type of non-technical information do they give to those that they contact? And is it all done telepathically? Ra says correct, it is done telepathically, and that they share the law of one philosophy on service to self, basically, and that in advanced groups there are rituals and exercises given, and these have been written down just the same as service to others have also written down the information given to them or the philosophies given to them by their teachers. And then in Ra's words, the philosophy concerns the service of manipulating others that they may experience service towards the other self, thus through this experience becoming able to appreciate service to self. The entities thus would become oriented towards service to self and in turn manipulate yet others so that they in turn might experience the service towards the other self. I honestly don't fully understand this, and I popped it into ChatGPT to try to break it down. Even ChatGPT's explanation still didn't make much sense to me. So I'm not going to spend much more time trying to interpret this or to understand this. Maybe again it might be explained further down the line in an easier to understand way. Sometimes a questioner, won't go deeper into a question, but he'll ask about it later in a later session. So we'll see if this comes up. And then the questioner asks, would this be the origin of what we call black magic? Ra says correct in one sense, but incorrect in another. The Orion group has helped the negatively oriented people among you. Even without this support, these people would still pursue the path of service to self. In your inner planes, there are many negative beings who act as teachers, guides, possessors for those individuals. And the inner plane beings help those who seek to enhance their self-service. I actually had this curiosity in a previous session. I remember the question coming up in the recording about how do they do this? How do they do the negative side of things? Ra has given us steps towards service to others, how to go more deeply into that. But I had the question of what are the steps for service to self? How would they be trained? And as they bring up, the whole concept of black magic, and it makes you realize that there are so many of these organized groups that teach and have structured ways of teaching and sharing how to move further along on the path to serve self. One such guy used to belong to a satanic church. He was a priest in a satanic church. His name is Mark Passio. He now shares on the opposite side of service to others, but because of his experience on the path to serve self and the position that he held, he has so much wisdom and insight that he shares on how that stuff works. And basically brings that information to the light side in order to empower those on the path to serve others. You can look him up. His I forget what they're called, but his videos online are really long. They're like 8 hours each. But the information from that perspective is really fascinating and worth the listen. The questioner goes on to ask if it is possible for an Earth entity to be so confused that they call upon the Confederation and the Orion group. And then this is where Ra says that it is possible for an untuned channel to receive both positive and negative communication. If the person is mainly oriented towards service to others but is confused, they'll start receiving messages of doom. If they're focused on self-service, the crusaders or negative entities will just share their philosophy without needing to lie. So moving on, Ra goes on to say that many people have been negatively affected because despite their good intentions, their desire for proof made them vulnerable to deceptive messages from the crusaders. These lies caused confusion and self-destructive behaviors, reducing the effectiveness of their service to others. And I've written here in my bright pink pen, well, if. With the whole word, all 4 letters, exclamation mark. It is, I will just make another little note here. It is so important to know your psychology when you are exploring this stuff, because of how easy it is to, distort the messages. So, and also to not recognize whether the information you are receiving is correct, whether it's from the right source, being sensitive enough to the energy that you are connecting with. Is this really a positively oriented being, or is it not? Is it posing as something positively oriented, but it actually doesn't have good intentions? And I am unable to pick up that it is negative, for example. It is so important to do that work on the self. And the more thou know thyself, the easier it is to be able to read others, whether incarnate or not. And then the questioner, are most crusaders 4th density? Ra says correct. Questioner, do entities in the 4th density normally appear invisible to us? Ra says it is possible for them to be visible to you, but mostly they choose not to be because of how difficult it is to concentrate on dealing with the 3rd density vibrations. Questioner, are there any Confederation or Orion entities walking among us that are important in our society? Ra says none at that time from either groups, but the Orion group have 2 types of entities that do their bidding. 1 are thought forms, 2 are robots. The questioner asks, could you describe these robots? Ra says they look like any other being. Questioner, who are the men in black? I do not remember anything about the men in black, so this feels like I'm being introduced to it for the first time. And then Ra says, a thought form type of entity which have some beingness to their makeup. So they Yeah, their true vibrational nature is without the density vibrational characteristics. Therefore, they are able to materialize and dematerialize when necessary. That's kind of creepy. The questioner, are they used by the Orion group? Ra, correct. Questioner, would I be able to catch one and keep him locked up? Ra says it depends which entity you grab. And then in his words, you wouldn't be able to grapple with a thought form entity of the Men in Black type. Questioner, would it be against the law of one, or would I be making a mistake by grabbing one of these entities? And then Ra says there are no mistakes under the law of one. He also goes on to say that he cannot advise. You have to make these decisions for yourself. And then just quickly on the note of there being no mistakes, this was such a major realization for me. And I think it was also one that I realized before I came to this work, was that there are no mistakes. It was one of those liberating insights, those liberating moments of, oh my gosh, nothing is as we think it is. Everything that I have deemed wrong has been through the lens of the people who came before me. And they don't even know why they have deemed most of this stuff wrong. Okay, given we suffer and we don't want to cause harm and suffering to others, that can stand on its own. We all, most of us anyway, have empathy, and we don't enjoy seeing other people suffer, whether we grew up harshly or not. But with regard to most other things that kind of keep us confined and boxed and under control, the realization that these things that I saw as mistakes in my past were really not as I imagined them to be. The lenses were lifted, the veil of these false perceptions were lifted. And so my perception or my understanding of mistakes completely changed. So yeah, it is a really powerful one. It also grants so much kindness and compassion to the self and forgiveness. It's so easy to forgive yourself when that perception has been removed. Anyway, moving on. The questioner, who are the wanderers and where do they come from? Ra, when a social memory complex has achieved its complete understanding of its desire, it may conclude that it desires service to others, specifically helping those who call for help. And you may call them, he says, the brothers and sisters of sorrow, which move towards this calling of sorrow. So they're from all over the universe, basically. The questioner, how many are incarnate on the earth right now? Ra says there's a heavy influx at that time, which are being born, which are coming onto the earth, so the number is rising rapidly, but approximately 65 million at that time. And that many are basically coming in, or many more are coming in to help shift the energy of this place. The questioner, are most from the fourth density? Ra says few, most are from the sixth density. And then in his words, the desire to serve must be distorted towards a great deal of purity of mind and bravery. The challenge or danger of the wanderer is that it will forget its mission and become karmically involved and be swept into basically the problems it came to help destroy. The questioner asks, how might they become karmically involved? And Ra says, by acting in a consciously unloving manner in action with others. The questioner, do any have physical ailments? Ra says, because of the extreme gap in vibratory distortions between the third and sixth density, most have some form of handicap or difficulty, basically, or feeling, of alienation, which is severe. Most have some form of handicap, difficulty, or feeling of alienation, my notes, which is severe. Most common is alienation. And then they could also have personality disorders and body complex ailments because of the difficulty in adjusting to the planet's vibration. Other things as well, like allergies, are common. I think maybe this is one of the most popularly called upon bit of information among light workers is the feeling of alienation. I see this everywhere. One of the top 10 reasons for for recognizing whether you're a wanderer or a light worker or a starseed or not, and right at the top, you feel like you don't belong. Right? I guess most of the people listening to this, probably do not feel like, or at some point didn't feel like they belonged. If you're listening to this kind of work, then there's a high chance that, you might not feel like you kind of fit in unless you are so lucky that you are surrounded by other light workers or soul family. But I think most of us tend to be kind of planted in the middle of places where it's not common. You kind of have to find your soul family somewhere along the journey. But for the most part, your family generally is not one that's interested in this type of stuff. Nor are your friends that you went to school with or were in university or may even be an adult with. And nor are your colleagues, unless or until you get to a certain point or were lucky to be born into an environment where you did have that kind of support. But yeah, that's why we have these communities, right? The questioner, what's the best way to heal? And then Ra says this is the last question. And it's to realize intelligent infinity within. And it requires conscious awareness of the spiritual nature of reality. When I went through my first spiritual awakening, it was that realizing of the oneness of all. I am everything. Everything is me. When I say me, I don't mean the small ego me. I mean the big me, the big I. And at that time, my eyesight started improving. There were moments where I had to remove my glasses because I couldn't see through them anymore. My hearing became super sensitive. My skin cleared up. There were so many physical things in my body that shifted at that time. Now I didn't understand it because I had no access, well, not no access, but I wasn't seeking the answers. I was just experiencing. But I really felt like Spider-Man. Like something had been activated and I was superhuman. I felt superhuman. Also being able to sense energy, of the people and the trees and the plants and the earth and everything around me. It was like something had been turned on that had never been turned on before, and all the things that were not working correctly were being corrected. So, this intelligent infinity healing your body through realizing it, it's no joke. It really works. However, on the other side, I'm still wearing my glasses because contraction in consciousness, and my skin broke out again a couple years later. And so I guess we're going through the motions of realizing the stuff that was realized before. It's an interesting journey going through it again, especially looking back and knowing that it is possible, that level of consciousness is possible. So, and it's possible to maintain it for extended periods. That it's not just the possibility that you kind of, expand suddenly, and then you contract, and then you expand, and then you contract, and this is happening up and down in your day or in your week, it's possible to expand and maintain that level of consciousness for extended periods. Okay, continuing on. He uses Kala as an example and says that Kala has a blockage in the indigo ray or in the third eye, and that if this is unblocked and intelligent energy is allowed to freely stream through, that her body will be healed, all her physical ailments. They also go on to say that Kala's heart is also overly open due to universal love and the desire to serve others. And that because of this, she spends a lot of her energy and time regarding others and not herself, which is primarily because of the blockage in her third eye, which is related to unworthiness. And that if that blockage is unlocked, the heart will be balanced. I'm not sure if I've talked about this in any other videos, but the necessity of the balancing of love and wisdom. That, you know, if you open your heart and you're not opening your heart and opening your wisdom center, which I always saw as the throat. I never quite connected it with the third eye, but I guess with the third eye you see things as they are and not as you imagine them to be. That would potentially balance the other chakras as well. So yeah, I'm going to leave it there. And right at the end, just one final note, they did ask one more question. They shared that each of the group, or rather the questioner asked if any of them are wanderers, and Ra shared that each of them are all wanderers in a shared mission. So yeah, I hope you guys found this session interesting. And if you have anything you'd like to share in the comments, please always do, even if I don't have the capacity to kind of meet them intellectually, each and every comment. I am finding that these days my attention is really split, and I'm doing a lot more than allows me to be fully conscious and available in every comment. However, I really enjoy reading them and engaging with them at the level that I'm able to when I do. So I appreciate all of you guys, and I hope you are gaining as much as I am through this process. Much, much, much love, and I will see you guys on session 13. Take it easy.